Daniel's mind raced, his heart pounding with dread. The creature before him, the faceless figure, moved with unnerving slowness, as if savoring every moment of his terror. It reached out with its featureless hands, fingers elongated into claws. The air around him thickened, heavy with an almost suffocating presence, as though the bus itself was alive and feeding off his fear. He had no time to think. His instincts kicked in, and he bolted toward the back of the bus, heart pounding in his chest. But as he ran, the aisle seemed to stretch impossibly long, the walls of the bus closing in around him. He could hear the whispers again, louder now, swirling through his mind like a tornado. You cannot escape. The door, the one that had once opened to freedom, was now completely shut, locked with an eerie finality. Daniel pounded his fists against the cold, rusted metal, the screech of his knuckles against the door only adding to the nightmare. He turned to face the front of the bus, where the faceless figure now stood, no longer a passive observer. It had joined the ranks of the hollow-eyed passengers, its head tilted slightly as if studying him. But there was something different now, something worse. The growls had intensified, the noises reverberating through the walls of the bus, as if the engine was now a living, breathing creature, filled with malice and hunger. The low growl echoed through the bus like a thunderclap, vibrating in his bones. Then, the windows shattered, and the entire structure of the bus seemed to groan as though it was being torn apart by an unseen force. The creature, no, the thing, began to move closer. Daniel's body screamed with exhaustion, but he pushed forward, forcing his legs to carry him toward the driver's seat, where the front of the bus seemed to offer some sort of twisted sanctuary. He didn't know what he was hoping for. Maybe a way out. Maybe some sign that this was all a nightmare. But the closer he got, the more twisted and monstrous the figures around him seemed. They weren't just passengers anymore. They had transformed into grotesque shapes, humanoid, but misshapen, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles and faces that were nothing more than empty voids. Their mouths gaped wide, filling the air with silent screams. But it was the way their heads jerked at him, each one tracking his every movement, that filled him with a primal, bone-deep terror. He couldn't breathe. The air was thick, suffocating him, drowning him in the oppressive darkness of the bus. The more he ran, the more the space around him warped, shrinking, bending, as if the very geometry of the bus was changing to trap him. He could hear the soft scraping of claws against the seats as the faceless passengers slowly began to shuffle toward him, their movements jerky and unnatural. Daniel reached the driver's seat, but there was no driver. The seat was empty, save for the long, shadowy figure that seemed to stretch upward like some dark entity. The red lights flickered once more, casting an eerie glow over the place. Join us. The whisper was louder this time, a chorus of countless voices, each one rasping and distorted, reverberating in his skull. Daniel slammed his fists against the dashboard, hoping for some sort of control. His pulse was racing, and a feeling of hopelessness gripped him, knowing that there was no way out. The red lights grew brighter, distorting his vision. It was as though the bus was pushing him closer to the edge, driving him into the heart of this dark, otherworldly abyss. You can't leave. A sharp pain shot through Daniel's chest, as though something invisible had gripped his heart with cold fingers. He gasped for air, staggering backward. His vision blurred as shadows twisted around him, and the walls of the bus started to ripple like water. Then he saw it. A doorway, shimmering faintly in the center of the bus. A gateway. It stood in stark contrast to the chaos around him. It pulsed with an unnatural, inviting light, as if it held the promise of escape. Without thinking, Daniel ran toward it, his heart thudding wildly in his chest. His legs burned, his body heavy with fear, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when he had this one chance. But as he reached for the door, a hand shot out of the shadows, long skeletal fingers grasping his arm with inhuman strength. He turned, gasping, and saw the figure, its face still a void, now impossibly close. The passengers were closing in, their empty eyes fixated on him, and the growls from the front of the bus had turned into something worse, a deep, thunderous growl that shook the very air around him. You belong to us now. The words felt like ice. Daniel's body stiffened. He pulled away from the skeletal hand, but it was too strong. Something was pulling him into the shadowy doorway. His body was frozen, not by fear alone but by the unrelenting pull of the thing that lurked beyond. With a final desperate surge, he pushed himself forward, throwing himself into the doorway. But the instant his body passed through, everything went black. The night was colder than usual when Daniel Reeves, a journalist from the city, arrived in Black Hollow. He had read countless online forums about this so-called cursed bus and, being a skeptic, saw it as nothing more than local folklore. Determined to expose it as a myth, he decided to investigate firsthand. Daniel checked his watch. 3:29 a.m. Perfect timing. He positioned himself at the desolate bus stop near the old railway bridge, the location most witnesses mentioned in their stories. His camera was set, microphone ready, and flashlight firm in his grip. The streetlights flickered above, casting eerie shadows that danced against the pavement. The town was unnervingly quiet. No distant hum of cars, no crickets chirping, just an unnatural stillness. Then, at precisely 3:33 a.m., the faint sound of an approaching engine broke the silence. A red double-decker bus materialized from the mist, its headlights dull, as though drained of life. Daniel felt a chill creep up his spine, but he steadied himself. The bus pulled to a slow, agonizing stop in front of him. The doors creaked open with an unnatural groan. The inside was dark, save for dim crimson lights casting elongated shadows. No driver. No passengers. Just rows of empty, time-worn seats. Daniel hesitated, his pulse quickening. He reached for his camera and took a deep breath before stepping inside. The second his foot touched the floor, the bus doors slammed shut with a forceful finality. The vehicle lurched forward, sending him stumbling. "Hello," Daniel called out. His voice echoed back eerily. The bus smelled of rust and something more pungent, something decayed. The air felt heavy, thick with an unplaceable dread. Daniel clutched his camera tightly as he moved further inside. The old seats were torn, their fabric stained with what looked like dark patches of dried liquid. The deeper he walked, the more his unease grew. Then he saw it. A figure sat at the very back of the bus. Still. Motionless. Cloaked in shadow. Daniel's breath hitched. "Hey, who are you?" he asked, voice shaking despite himself. The figure didn't move. It was only when the bus passed beneath a flickering streetlight that he saw its face. Or rather, the lack of one. It was a void. A smooth, featureless surface where a face should have been. Daniel's body went rigid with terror. He took a step back, but the bus suddenly jolted, sending him falling onto a seat. The moment his back hit the worn-out cushion, whispers flooded the air. They weren't in any language he recognized. Low, guttural murmurs that curled into his ears and burrowed into his mind. Daniel clamped his hands over his ears, squeezing his eyes shut. The bus picked up speed, its engine roaring like a predator on the hunt. His camera, still recording, hung uselessly from his neck. Then, the whispering stopped. Daniel opened his eyes. The figure was gone. The only sound was the rhythmic screeching of the wheels against the pavement. The windows had fogged up, and outside, the streets no longer looked like Black Hollow. The buildings seemed distorted, as if melting into darkness. The street signs bore unreadable symbols that twisted and shifted like living things. A wave of nausea hit Daniel. He turned, running towards the doors, pounding against them. "Let me out. Stop the bus." No response. Then, as if in answer, the dim crimson lights flickered, and he saw them. Rows of passengers had appeared out of nowhere, their heads all turning in unison toward him. Their faces were warped, hollow-eyed, mouths stretched into silent screams. They sat stiffly, their hands clutching seat handles in an iron grip. Their skin was an unnatural gray, translucent in the dim light, as though they were only half present in this world. Daniel stumbled backward, horror paralyzing him. He had to get out. He reached into his pocket, gripping his phone. He still had signal. With shaking fingers, he tried calling his friend, Mark, the only one who knew about his investigation. The line connected. "Mark, listen to me. I'm on the bus. The red bus. It's real. It's static." Then, a voice, distorted, layered, inhuman. "You shouldn't have boarded. Now, you belong to us." The phone screen flickered violently before the battery drained in an instant. The device went dead in his hands. A slow, creeping horror crawled up Daniel's spine. He turned back toward the passengers. They were standing now. No movement, no sound. Just standing. Staring. Their lifeless eyes bore into him, their mouths slowly parting, revealing nothing but endless darkness within. The bus shook violently, the windows warping, as if the vehicle itself was shifting into some other dimension. The overhead lights sputtered, plunging the bus into near darkness. Then, a deep, guttural growl resonated from the front of the bus, the first sign of something else. Something that was neither human nor machine. Daniel barely had time to react before the bus took a sharp turn. His body was thrown against the seats, the air thickening like a suffocating fog. He could feel unseen hands grasping at his limbs, pulling, dragging. The red bus was no longer moving through Black Hollow. It was taking him somewhere else. Somewhere he was never meant to go. The world outside the bus twisted and blurred, shadows merging into one another like ink in water. Daniel felt his stomach churn as the air grew denser and colder. The passengers still stood, unmoving, their hollow eyes locked onto him. He tried to steady his breathing, but every second felt like he was sinking deeper into something inescapable. A loud screech pierced through the air as the bus suddenly halted. Daniel was flung forward, barely managing to grab onto a seat. He scrambled to his feet, scanning the surroundings through the fogged-up windows. There was no cityscape, no roads, just a void of black nothingness stretching in all directions. The doors hissed open. A chilling wind swept through the interior, carrying whispers that sent ice through his veins. The passengers remained motionless. Daniel hesitated, but something deep inside told him he had to move. He inched toward the open doors, heart pounding in his chest. Just as he was about to step out, a skeletal hand shot from the darkness outside, gripping the edge of the doorway. Then another. And another. A chorus of breathless voices filled the air. "Join us. You cannot leave. You are one of us now." Daniel stumbled back, terror flooding his veins. The faceless figure from earlier reappeared, now standing directly in front of him. This time, it moved. Daniel's breath hitched as the faceless figure took a step toward him. The dim red glow of the bus lights flickered, casting warped shadows across the aisle. The skeletal hands from outside clutched the doorway, pulling unseen horrors into view. Figures emerged from the darkness, twisted, elongated beings with hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Their mouths stretched unnaturally wide as they whispered in unison. Daniel staggered back, heart hammering against his ribs. He had to act fast. But where could he run when there was nowhere left to go?